The film has been put together by a group of then majors and captains who served in critical unit appointments in the 1971 war with Pakistan. The aim is primarily to remember where the individual units participated in the operations, and also remember some of the young officers and men who made this victory possible. You will never come closer to the truth than in this film.
In understanding Longewala, Part 1, we had covered the events leading to the Indo-Pak conflict in 1971, the overall deployment at that time, and the complete surprise achieved by Pakistan in the Longewala sector on 5th December, the first day of battle. We now pick up the battle on the morning of 6th December. Let's look at the actual profile of both the divisions on 6th December. Pakistan 18 Infantry Division had taken the initiative and attacked, and was stretched to its maximum. The division had just 2 infantry battalions at its firm base, one each at Gabbar and Bhagla. GHQ quickly understood the gravity of the situation, and by 7th December, 60 Brigade and Guides Cavalry, ex the Army Reserve South, had been released to 18 Division and moved to Rahim Yar Khan. So it could be surmised that the Indian threat to Rahim Yar Khan only existed if India had taken the initiative of the offensive and achieved complete surprise.
Since Pakistan had seized the initiative, the capture of Rahim Yar Khan presently was out of the question.
Let's now look at the macro picture from the Indian side. With the destructive victory at Longewala on 5th December and the loss of 22 tanks by Pakistan, the Chief of Army Staff, Sam Manekshaw in Delhi, immediately identified a fleeting chance for total victory and made it known to the Southern Army Commander. The Army Commander, General Bivur, ordered 12 Infantry Division to go on the offensive, saying that Khambata must plan and destroy the enemy force quickly and, if possible, by last light 8 December 1971. He also stipulated that the plan should be based on brigade attacks, fully supported by artillery and armour. He wanted the offensive plan to reach him at his TAC headquarters in Jodhpur by 1100 hours on 7th December. Later in the afternoon, Khambata got the following personal message from General Bivur. For GOC from Army Commander. Enemy is now without water and getting held up in the sand. You and the Air Force have destroyed half his tank force and many vehicles. You have superiority in total tanks and equality in types of tanks. You must therefore not let his tanks get away. His force, including the infantry, must be destroyed within our borders. Air Force is geared up fully to support you. All good luck.
Readjustment, Indian 12th Division.
So far, except for the complete surprise the Pakistanis had achieved, the Indians had regained balance quickly by some quick decisions made by 0200 hours when the GOC called off the attack on Rahim Yar Khan and readjusted to the new threat as follows.
The tactical command of the breach and south had been handed over to 30 Infantry Brigade, commanded by Brigadier Ramdas. 322 Brigade at Ramgarh, commanded by Brigadier Dugal, was tasked to be prepared to advance from Ramgarh to Longewala and evict the enemy till the IB. 45 Brigade was commanded by a splendid battle-hardened soldier, Brigadier R.O. Kharbanda, who had been the brigade major of 7 Brigade in the Battle of Namkachu in 1962. He retained the northern sector where the Indian offensives had been launched. Ravi Law, with 6 independent armoured squadron and his brand new T-55 tanks, had moved immediately on tracks on 5th December from Kishangarh to Longewala via Ramgarh and was already in location at Longewala. Kuti's A squadron of 20th Lancers had moved to Tanot as the Div reserves. 20th Lancers Lesser Squadron had moved on tracks oblique tank transporters to Ramgarh and come under command 322 Brigade at 0730 hours on 6 December. The 322 Brigade plan for advance was as follows.
Advance to Longewala along the Ramgarh-Longewala axis to close in with the retreating enemy and inflict heavy casualties. Next, the brigade placed 3 Jats under command 20th Lancers for the advance operation of war. In phase 2, place a squadron each under command 3rd Jat and 9th Jack Li to advance to the international border and evict the enemy. 30 Brigade was tasked for a firm base in Longewala, and the following plan evolved. The commander ordered the reorientation to the new direction of attack. 13 Kumaon, on return, was to reopen and reoccupy the previous defences. 6-5 Gurkhas was to hold the present position and provide a screen 2 kilometers from the defences at Sadewala. 17 Rajrif had been ordered to reinforce Longewala with an infantry company and a troop of tanks X-80 ADR, and also to be prepared to build up on Longewala as per the developing situation.
Pakistani plans for the main strike elements of Army Reserve South.
Attack with 1 armoured division and 2 infantry divisions, 7th Division and 33 Divisions, opposite Ganganagar Anupgarh. This force, after crossing the Bikaner Canal, was to swing north and possibly threaten Ludhiana. To make this task easier, 18th Division opposite Longewala was to attack Jaisalmer to firstly divert Indian reserves from the semi-desert sector to the desert sector, and secondly give depth to the north-south communication lines at Rahim Yar Khan. It will be seen that in the desert sector, the Pakistani strategic reserves could get into position much quicker than the Indian strategic reserves.
Options for the GOC 12 Infantry Division. At this point, for GOC 12 Infantry Division, the Pakistani 18th Division lay reeling and stretched out before him. On the 6th morning, he had 2 options available to him. Firstly, an immediate and on-the-fly attack on the intruding troops in contact, without stabilizing his firm base for the attack. And secondly, regain balance and organize a coordinated pushback and destruction of the enemy once the position and the intention of the Army Reserve South became more clear.
It must be said, without satellites and modern information gathering methods, intelligence communication was mainly by the human sources, moles, railway staff and low-grade sources, and actionable information on the movement of strategic reserves was normally received after a period of 3 days. Battle situation, 6 December. 0600 hours dawned as the exhausted soldiers on both sides, who had been on the move for a minimum of 48 hours and under intense battle conditions for 24 hours,
could still not expect the pressure to be released.
First Light saw Peter Bhatia and his troop return from Chand Singh Tekri, where they had been deployed as a trigger for the expected attack on by the Pakistani division that night, which did not take place. That morning, Commander 30 Brigade took the following immediate actions. 6th Independent Armored Squadron was ordered to immediately establish contact with the enemy. 17 Rajrif, who had already reinforced the defences in Longewala, were then ordered to occupy a battalion defended area and dig in and lay mines. 6-5 Gurkhas was tasked to obtain enemy information. 13 Kumaon was reopening and reoccupying their defences.
There was a flow of ground information now coming in from prisoners and stragglers, erstwhile East Pakistani Bengalis, maps and papers from hit tanks, captured weapons, and patrolling.
6th Independent Armored Squadron was the first to move out at 06300 hours. They had no infantry, no FOO, no FAC, and no artillery support. They moved 2 troops up with Bhadbade and Hushar Singh leading, with Peter Bhatia close behind. As they approached the height of the Kharotar ridgeline, they came under heavy machine gun and RCL fire and commenced their fire and move. Law quickly moved forward and instructed all tanks and commanders to fight open up, as without infantry and noise of the tank engines, it was very difficult to observe and get information from a buttoned-up tank. Towards afternoon, a troop was ordered to feed the northern flank. The Sardar Chain Singh of 62 Cavalry had just 2 weeks ago reported to the pension establishment in Ahmednagar for release from the army, and now found himself mobilized and facing the enemy. As luck would have it, a direct mortar round hit the open cupola of Chain Singh's tank, which immediately caught fire. He was killed instantaneously. After some time, Bhadbade was asked to probe from the south. There was no response from his tank. Peter Bhatia dismounted and ran across to find that he had been shot through the head by machine gun fire. He was just 20 years old. Meanwhile, at 0730 hours, 322 Brigade at Ramgarh commenced its advance with 20th Lancers leading the advance guard. Suraj Baswani was the leading squadron commander. At this time, it was not known if any enemy had moved from Longewala towards Ramgarh. The brigade was to sanitize the area till Longewala and then clear the 2 tracks to BP 635 and 638. The advance guard of 20th Lancers and 3 Jats completely sanitized the Ramgarh-Longewala road. By the afternoon, 6 IS was stretched along the Kharotar ridge. During the day, there had been some enemy shelling, RCL and MFG fire. However, there were no tank-to-tank engagements. By the end of the day, there had been 3 Indian tank casualties, 1 each by enemy tank, RCL and mortar fire. 2 tank commanders, Rasaldar Chain Singh and Lieutenant Bhadbade, had been killed from 6th Independent Armored Squadron, and Dafedar Harbir Singh of 20th Lancers had also been killed.
Towards the evening, the GOC visited the brigade at Longewala. Bertie Joginder Singh, Adjutant 65 Golkar, recalls the visit. I, along with my CO 13 Kumau and CO 17 Rajrif, came to the road to meet him. The commander, BM 30 Brigade and Major Chandpuri were also there. I remember Brigadier Ramdas telling the GOC he was going to attack the Pakistan positions quickly, as they seemed to be very demoralized and were on the run. The GOC's reply shocked me, as he told the commander, "Ramu, our neck has been luckily saved. Let us not stretch our neck. Maybe we will not be so lucky next time." After the interaction, he left. Brigadier Ramdas then called us to explain his plan for the advance, with 13 Kumau and 65 Gurkhas astride the BP 638 track and Rajrif following up. He said he hoped to convince the GOC to let him lead the advance, as there had been no casualties in any of his battalions. This was later agreed to by the GOC, and we led the advance on the 8th. Application of armor. It will be seen that the area has a layout of sand dunes in the longitudinal direction, northeast to southwest. The relative heights have been marked to give an idea of the terrain.
There are some areas of continuous sand dunes and some relatively flat spaces. However, it is definitely very difficult going. The div axis of advance would be developed moving against the grain of the country, across country, along a camel track, which is not even a class 5 axis. Let's take a cross section of the sand dune to understand this a little better. The sand dune is held together by the bottom set bed, the top set bed, and the foreset bed, indicated by the 3 red arrows. The height of the sand dune builds up on the front set bed, which is the thinnest and the most unstable, and it is also known as the knuckle of the sand dune. So, if you were moving from west to east in a tank, you climbed along till the top set bed gave way and the tank then rolled down the slip face. However, if you were moving from east to west, you hit the front set bed at a steep angle and the collapsing sand stopped further progress. To continue in a westerly direction, you would either have to move north or south along the base of the sand dune and find a crossing place. So when the Pakistani tanks came towards Longewala, they slid easily down the Nagaland, whereas the Indian tanks would have to find a crossing place on each successive high sand dune. This is easily seen in this photograph, where you can clearly see the tracks of the Pakistani tanks as they slid down the knuckle end, whereas our tanks are having to find a suitable crossing place. Both Colonel Bawa and Chiki were battle veterans from Chamb and Chushul and clearly understood the terrain. The only way to get behind the enemy was to use a border track on either flank and swiftly move past him, and then move along the grain of the country to get behind him. The regiment made plans for the Kharotar opposition and warned 6 IAS and A Squadron in Tanot to be prepared to move at short notice. The plan was put up to division through 30 Brigade, but what was not accepted by them. The dissent was recorded in the 20th Lancers letter number 1001/GS/Ops dated 24th December 1971, which was the after action report signed by the Commandant on the 24th of December.
Overall assessment, 6 December. On the Indian battle board, from ground inputs, you had the following indicators. The forward 206 Brigade was in contact at Kharotar. The 51 Brigade had started breaking contact at 1600 hours on 5th December, and its location was not really clear. Captain Sanga's 2 aerope sorties that day gave us the following information. Just 1 command vehicle had been observed in the area of BP 638. 10 vehicles and a tank had been observed in the 15R area. Based on other ground inputs, the Div headquarters linked 15R to the Longewala Dhar high ground and identified it as a potentially good area for defense. On the Pakistani side, Major General Mustafa had visited the 206 Brigade position at Kharotar at 11:30 hours and had ordered Brigadier Arbab to regain the Longewala Jaisalmer road and 51 Brigade to hold out in the 27R complex on the IB. However, by the end of the day, based on the status reports of the 2 brigades, he decided, firstly, a planned withdrawal of the division, with 51 Brigade holding out at BP 638 and 206 Brigade passing through. There was perhaps no Gabbar gallop, as purported in the subsequent inquiry, as Commander 206 Brigade, which was the Kharotar Brigade, went on subsequently to become a corps commander. Secondly, he ordered the thinning out of the Kharotar position on 6 December. This was a moment that will always be remembered in the annals of history of 20th Lancers. Chikki, the then second in command, recounts this on many a regimental day in Badakhana. I can never forget that we had a squadron of brand new T-59 tanks under our command, but were not permitted to go ahead with our plans to use them boldly to back the retreating enemy. If only we had been given the go-ahead to execute our plans, 20th Lancers would have created history. I often talk to this with Kuti and Tejveer. May God bless their souls. The Indian assessment on 7th December, the Div Battle Board had the two enemy brigades at Kharotar and Maganwala Dhar. However, the ground situation was different. You had only the rear elements of 206 Brigade at Kharotar, who would be giving warning of the Indian advance. Delay elements of 51 Brigade were deployed on the opposing heights of 27R and Kharowala Dara. 51 Brigade was in the 27R complex astride BP 638. By now, they had had 2 days and 3 nights to prepare and coordinate their defenses, and perhaps even had time for rehearsals. The Indians were therefore not going to have an easy run. On 8th December, the Indian advance commenced and must have certainly looked spectacular. 45 tanks and an infantry brigade on the march. You had Law's 6 IAS with Kanti Swaroop's 65 Gurkhas heading for BP 638 and Tejveer Sirohi's C Squadron along with Jatar's 13 Kumaon heading for BP 635. However, the initial shakeout had its problems and there had been no time for regrouping. Bertie, the adjutant of 65 Gurkhas, recalls, "Initially, I thought the Pakistani T-55s were behind us. It was only when I saw the English markings that I frantically radioed the RCL teams not to fire on our own tanks." The formation soon settled down to a long march ahead. One thing was clear: the advance was not going to be at tank speed. 6 IAS and 65 Gurkhas led the advance with Major Gupta as the leading company commander. On reaching the heights of 27R and Kurlawala Dhora, leading elements of 65 Gurkhas came under effective enemy fire. To develop the operations, Major Dhral's A Company was ordered to establish a firm base in the area of Maganwala Dhar, whilst Dhondial's B Company moved into position. By this time, Tejveer's squadron had reached to the Y junction and Billu's RHQ troop was engaged by effective RCL fire and the leading tank was hit. With utter disregard for his own life, Naib Rasaldar Rachpal Singh moved forward and evacuated the hit. He, along with Ghanti Baswan, carried the wounded to the stretcher-bearer jeep for move to ADS. For his exemplary courage under enemy fire, he was awarded the Sena Medal. B Company then commenced their attack from the west and met with stiff resistance. As pressure built up from Dhral's company, the enemy started pulling out of Maganwala Dhar. Subedar Meghnad Gurung displayed outstanding qualities of leadership and courage, and for his bravery was awarded the Veer Chakra. Rifleman Hom Bahadur was also awarded the Sena Medal posthumously in the same action. By evening, the enemy weakened and started his withdrawal. Amal's Delta Company was told to push through and put a stop at Sarkari Wala Tibba. By night, the enemy had moved down to Dhangsi Dhora and then withdrew. However, before leaving, they left behind 20 dead and 12 assorted vehicles, including the commanding officer's jeep. 9th December. The advance commenced on the morning of 9th December, and at 10:45, Captain Sangha and Captain Mathur Soti reported enemy at BP 638. and 2 columns of own troops, 2 kilometers from BP 638 and the other 1 kilometer from BP 635. Also, there were many burnt vehicles at the Sarkariwala Toba. 13 Kumaon was leading the advance. By 12:30, they had contacted BP 638 position and were under effective enemy fire. The leading tank troops of Bani Singh and Hoshiar were pounding the enemy positions. The 3 25-pounder regiments, 167, 168 and 170, were all deployed along the BP 635 track, all giving effective RT support, with the light regiment of 122mm mortars too. The CO Colonel Jatar decided to commence the attack with D Company of Major Shekhawat, rolling down from the high ground in the south to Ridge 3 and finishing at the company location on flat ground just north of the road. Major Shekhawat gave his HR as 1405 hours. Although wounded in the leg, Shekhu inspired the company forward and the objective was captured by 1645. The company saw some very bitter hand-to-hand fighting. For his valiant effort, despite being wounded, Major Shekhawat was awarded the Sena Medal. At 1630 hours, the Mathur Sangha aeroplane sortie reported a lot of dust from Gabbar. At 1645, 2 starfighters made their only low-level raid into Indian territory and then beat a very hasty retreat. Phase 2 of the attack was to be Chiddi Singh's B Company launching through Delta Company. But with the delay, Colonel Jatar did not want to get involved in a prolonged, slow night fighting operation. He therefore decided to quickly assault frontally with armour. Peter Bhatia and a troop of tanks, along with Chiddi's company, commenced the attack at 1745. It started getting dark. Captain Bajwa, the FOO, was on Peter Bhatia's tank and brought down accurate artillery fire as they advanced. The objective was overrun, with some ferocious hand-to-hand fighting taking place. The tanks went well ahead of their objective and across the IB in the gathering darkness. The retreating enemy was engaged on the next ridge, both by tank and artillery fire. The tanks discovered they were in the midst of an Adam area with a number of B vehicles and a large amount of ammunition, stores, a few anti-aircraft guns, rations and FOL. The sounds of war faded into complete darkness, and after dark the tanks returned to the main position. The sporadic fire, however, continued. There was always the possibility of a counterattack by the enemy. However, there was no further action that night. The unit remained on edge as there was one company position still remaining. Throughout the advance, there had been a constant attrition on the Pakistani vehicles by our Air Force directed by our Air OP, casualties by field artillery directed by the Air OP, and retreating forces themselves destroying defective vehicles. The enemy tanks destroyed so far were 19 T-59s near the village and 2 Sherman tanks on the Kharotar Ridge. There was a total of 63 B vehicles in 3 blobs of 20, 15 and 20 vehicles, with the remainder 10 vehicles dotted along the tracks. At 0730, Raghu's company and Bani Singh's troop lined up to clear the last opposition. Daylight brought out that despite the aggressive ground action by own infantry at night, the enemy had already fled and there were only some stragglers left. The last Pakistani had been evicted from Indian soil in Longewala. The Razangla battalion had once again performed brilliantly. 51 Pakistanis were buried at BP 638. 3 prisoners of war were taken. 5 RCLs, 7 Browning machine guns, 2 3-inch mortars, and Colonel Sadiq Mohammed, CO 1st Punjab's personal belongings were now in the possession of the battalion. 6 IS, raised not even a month ago, had done exceedingly well too. Ved Dhaya, a troop leader, remembers his squadron commander fondly. He says, Ravi always deployed us wonderfully. He used to move often in his rover to correct our tank positions. During attacks, he did well because he led from the front and motivated us throughout the battle. A brave heart, cool in crisis, confident in command, and a thorough professional. 6 IS and 6-5 Gurkhas were then ordered to move to Masit Varotar. 2nd Lieutenant Chadda and Lieutenant Dalvi were the first officers to cross into Pakistan. In the meantime, 6 IS moved with speed and came across an abandoned 130 RT gun position at Masit Varotar. There were a huge quantity of 130mm shells and other paraphernalia related to a gun position. The forward air controller, Flight Lieutenant Nirdosh Tyagi, was on the squadron commander's tank and was able to direct the aircraft onto the enemy tanks, and soon there were 5 enemy tanks bellowing with smoke 3,000 meters from the squadron forward line. This is the profile of the division on 10th December and stayed the same till 16 December, when one of the shortest wars in history came to an end. 322 Brigade, B Squadron 20th Lancers and 6 IAS were however withdrawn to Jaisalmer and on 12th December moved to Munabao in 11 Infantry Div sector. Only 2 brigades remained to hold this sector. The area occupied by own troops in Pakistan after the war can easily be seen. After the ceasefire, a detailed count of hits was carried out by the 10 independent Aerope Flight Air Force. Major Atma Singh observed that 27 tanks and 122 B vehicles of the Pakistani 18 Infantry Division had been destroyed in the battle area by the advancing Indian Army, the Air Force, artillery fire, and the equipment destroyed by retreating Pakistani army. There is no doubt that this could not have been done without a complete harmony between the air and ground forces. After 50 years, what stays in the mind of the soldiers and airmen who took part in the war is not the theatrics of the film Border or the ugly inter-service media controversies created by individuals. But what stays are the turning points. No soldier can ever forget the turning points in battle. The first turning point was on the 5th of December, when the Air Force, with its spectacular attack in the morning, broke the back of the Pakistani assault and destroyed 21 tanks by that evening. What a perfect display of awesome combat power. The conduct of the Longewala company commander, Major Chandpuri, and Dafadar Harbir Singh of 20th Lancers was no less. These individuals had the guts and audacity to stand up and hold fast against an overwhelming enemy strength. They did not blink or flinch and showed the enemy that despite the overwhelming odds, they would not let them pass. They showed the rest of us the way. No soldier can ever forget this. The second turning point in the battle was the battle for BP 638, where the pride and sanctity of the nation depended on the success or failure of the attack of 13 Kumaon. 51 Pakistani soldiers are buried at BP 638 in comparison to the 38 Pakistanis buried almost 30 years later in the Battle of Tiger Hill in the Kargil War of 1997. Both these attacks were carried out by outstanding infantry battalions at a critical stage where their victory decided the outcome of the war in that theatre. It was the drive, determination and sheer guts of all these men that pushed us over the hill and regained the pride of our nation in this critical action. We are proud to have fought alongside airmen and battalions of that stature in these two turning points. We shudder to think of what would have happened if either had failed. It is these turning points that fill the hearts of every soldier who took part in the operation with hope and immense pride and still make him feel relevant today. I remember with pride the old crews I have worked with, MQMD Kashmir Singh, the quiet, soft-spoken, thorough gentleman from Amritsar district who, in his quiet way, always had the answers. Amrik Singh, my ARV driver, went on to become an honorary captain and the Rasaldar Major of 20th Lancers. Sawar Dalbir Singh, my operator, who also subsequently became an honorary lieutenant in 20th Lancers, and my driver Surjit. The bond is unbreakable. All old soldiers never forget, and we always reminisce proudly. He was getting old and paunchy, and his hair was falling fast. And he sat amongst the legion, telling stories of the past, of a war that he had fought in, and the deeds that he had done, and the exploits of his buddies. They were heroes, everyone. And though sometimes to his neighbors, his tales became a joke, all his buddies listened carefully, for they knew of where he spoke. But you'll hear his tales no longer, because the soldiers passed away, and the world's a little poorer, because the soldier died today.